Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
It was the second day Ethan had been on the train. 5 more hours and he would be home. He missed his family, his home village. He was glad that this Christmas he would celebrate not in a wagon with men, but at home. After all, it was the 5th year already on watch. And it was the first time when the owner suddenly let him go on holidays. Ethan was happy and a little sad, looking at the huge teddy bear on the 3rd shelf. All occupied, even cut down the bars a little bit to his 4-year-old son. Here's a kid to marvel at such a huge toy beast. "Who's your son or daughter?" asked Andrew's traveling companion. Also on watch, some of the smile answered Ethan. "And I have both a son and a daughter," nodded Andrew. "I'm bringing them presents too." "True, not so huge. A doll, a remote control car. My wife has a fur coat." "What are you getting your wife for Christmas?" "I don't have a wife." After a little silence, Ethan said, "She's dead." "I'm sorry." Andrew touched his shoulder sympathetically. Maybe the traveler wanted to know what had happened to Ethan's wife, but he hadn't been very talkative all the way. He hadn't said a word. Andrew looked at the travel companion expectantly, and realizing that he couldn't get anything out of him, went into the vestibule. Ethan just sighed and stared out of the window. Outside the window, the landscape, similar to his native land, was already flashing. Ethan thought about his own thoughts, remembering. He and Kelly had been friends since 1st grade, living next door to each other. Then their first love hit them head-on. It was around 9th grade. Parents had a big fight. They were afraid that their kids would want to try adult life before their time. And they just waved it off. What were they? And how could Ethan insult his Kelly? You don't pluck a bud before it's time. He remembered that. When he heard that phrase, he liked it. He treated Kelly like a pure, bright flower. The two of them had nothing going on in high school, although everyone in the neighborhood had long ago teased them as bride and groom. After school, Kelly went to medical school, and Ethan wanted to go to a technical university. Failed. He joined the army. And after the send-off, they had one and only one secret night. They ran away. So Kelly and Ethan left the table and went to the lake. And there in the hut, they had it all together. "Will you wait for me?" Ethan asked, hugging the girl. "How could I not? We're together now, together forever." Kelly whispered back to him. 2 years of the army flew by waiting for as many letters as Kelly wrote to Ethan. None of the soldiers in the unit got any. The guys were even jealous. Ethan even invited himself and was afraid not to be jinxed. He was on his way home. He was mentally pushing the train himself, but why was it dragging so slowly? Kelly was the first to jump on his neck on the platform. Ethan took her in his arms, kissed her. Then they came to their senses. Kelly blushed and at the preamble from Ethan. Looking at her parents, the boys those guys were standing around too after all. Ethan's mother was just smiling then. And the father, too, had chosen a good girl for his son since childhood. Then there was the wedding. It's a small village. So half of the inhabitants congratulated the young people on that day, and there were about 100 people there. It was fun, and Kelly and Ethan were the happiest. Their married life was beginning, and they imagined it to be cloudless and joyful. By that time, Kelly had already graduated from technical school, and she was sent to her native village as a paramedic. Ethan got a job as a tractor driver at the collective farm. Their parents contributed their money and bought a house for the young couple. And their family life began. Oh, how happy Kelly was when she realized 2 months later that they were pregnant. Kelly sure was. I couldn't believe it. Kelly definitely laughed. I'm a medical professional myself, and at the district polyclinic, it was already 7 weeks. I got it. "Kelly, my darling, how I love you." Ethan exclaimed and twirled his wife in his arms. She laughed and kissed him on the top of his head. And then the terrible thing happened. It happened in the fall. Kelly was on her way home from a call when a huge dog came out of dark alley and attacked a pregnant woman. She was about 7 months along. The soon-to-be maternity dog jumped on Kelly, pushed her, and she fell. There's no telling what else he would have done. Only the dog's owner jumped out after him, dragged him away. Peter apologized for a long time that he hadn't seen how the colobach had gone off the chain. Kelly listened. She was holding her stomach. Then she screamed. Piotr pulled the dog home and called an ambulance. The paramedics came quickly, took Kelly away, but there was nothing they could do. Their little girl died. Inside in the morning, Kelly was forced to give birth to a dead baby. It was scary. It was very, very scary. A normal woman, when she gives birth, and knows that the agony will be followed by the joy of meeting her loved one, but here only death. After the accident, Kelly spent a long time recovering, crying, and Ethan suffered. Blamed himself for not meeting his wife that night. In the hangar until dark, working with the tractor, damn it. And then it all happened. But a year later, the joy of a new pregnancy. This time Kelly was more careful than ever. Ethan accompanied her to work and met her from work, when he could of course, but he tried, and everything went well. It wasn't until the 6th month that she started bleeding. Just like that. There wasn't even a reason, and she lost Kelly. They were supposed to have a baby boy, but it never came, and the tears came again. Ethan comforted his wife as best he could, though his heart was torn to pieces by pain. They got through the grief, in work and business. It all seemed to be forgotten a year later, the new pregnancy. Kelly didn't tell anyone until the belly came in. Ethan was the only one who knew about it. I went to get registered. The doctors scolded Tanya. They said she was a doctor herself, but you were acting irresponsibly. Kelly just nodded. What can you say? Her coworkers wouldn't understand. When you've already had 2 failed pregnancies, you become superstitious. And then Kelly was able to carry and gave birth to their daughter. Alive and well, they thought at first. But Emily was only a day old when she simply did not wake up, died in the hospital. Infant death syndrome. It seemed like they were going to lose their minds. Kelly, inked from grief, she even started drinking. And only the support and help of their parents helped them shake it off. The doctors convinced Kelly and Ethan to go to town for a checkup. The doctors found some rare pathology. Ethan can't possibly have a viable child with it. There is, of course, the possibility that the baby could be born healthy. But that's only in theory. The genetic lab doctor told him honestly at the time. How much? Ethan asked. How much what? Excuse me, doctor? What percentage? That I can give birth to a healthy child that will be able to live and develop normally. Ethan asked with pain in his voice. 1% at most. Eyes downcast, the doctor answered. After this trip, Ethan was not himself. He considered himself inferior again from the bottle. He didn't feel sorry for himself now. What kind of a man is he when he can't have children? And he was black, and Kelly was chasing him away. Leave me alone. He yelled at her. You can still find a normal man. You'll have a child with me. You'll only suffer. Kelly cried and wouldn't leave. In the mornings, she gave him hangover pills and went to work and didn't forget a little. And in the evenings, Ethan and his concerts again. There's no telling how it would have ended. But then another misfortune came, and it was like a wedge that knocked out the other one. Ethan's parents were killed in a car accident. His father lost control on a slippery road. Killed both him and his mother. The grief sobered Ethan up. He realized how he'd been acting like a wimp lately. His parents knew, didn't they? They were upset. Mom, Dad, sleep well. He whispered at the funeral. Don't worry, I won't take another drop in my mouth. Our mouth and memory of you will not be shamed. And he kept his word. Once again returned to work, which was kicked out for absenteeism when he started drinking. But the thought of a child kept him going. And he realized that Kelly was thinking about it too. And one day, he suggested it to her. Kelly is a change, he said one night. Kelly was thinking about the dishes. Hearing those words, she looked at her husband confusedly. The cup jumped out of her hands and shattered with a clinking sound. What are you talking about? Longer, she whispered. You've been drinking again. Not a drop of it. Shook his head. Am I serious? Tanya, I know how much you want a baby, and I do. It's not working out. Yeah, I told you to get away from me. I'm sorry. It's emotional. And I can do it without you. I can do it without you. Sweetie. Haley replied again. Kelly sat down next to Ethan, and put her head on his shoulders. Together we are like two halves. Together, Kelly, we'll be together from now on. Just find someone to get pregnant. I won't say a word to you. I don't need to know anything. Kelly, I'm not gonna stop loving you. We're gonna keep living together and raising our baby. Let's make a deal. Kelly lifted her head and looked at Ethan seriously. I didn't hear any of that, and don't you even think that about me. I have never cheated on you, and I never will. I love you and only you. No kids and no need for kids. We'll live together. Ethan lowered his head. To be honest, he'd been expecting those words from his wife. He was glad to hear them, but at the same time it hurt so much. Why is this the way things are in life? Two people who truly love each other, that can be truly happy and seemingly together. More time passed. Kelly and Ethan never tried to have a baby. Kelly went on the pill, calmed down, and Ethan forgot. That year was difficult again. First, Kelly's father-in-law died of an illness. Then the collective farm collapsed, went bankrupt. People were out of work, including Ethan. But then a new farmer came in and started hiring people. But he paid such a pittance that normal laborers only turned their heads. Is it possible to work for a left uncle almost for free? So the men went north, yes, to Vacton. And Ethan also found an ad in the newspaper that the North needed tractor drivers and went there. Italy supported him. She saw that Ethan was withering away without work, and he was ashamed, as if the head of the family is sitting on his wife's neck. Before he left, I told Kelly Ethan some unexpected news. She's pregnant. How could she be? Ethan was confused. The pills. I quit taking them, Kelly confessed to Kelly. Why? Ethan looked at his wife in despair. You know how this is going to end, don't you? Why are you torturing yourself? I can't do it any other way. Whispered. Kelly, the doctor told you then that there's a 1% chance of having a healthy baby. I mean, it's only 1%. The whole 1%. Kelly looked him in the eye, and I believe we can still make it. Ethan killed his wife. He was so worried. How's he supposed to go now? Who's he gonna leave Kelly with? I mean, it's gonna be hard on her. But Kelly assured him she could handle it. What if anything helps? Her mom, Vanessa. You go and don't worry about anything, she smiled at him. And I'm strong, and I'll get through this. Grief is mine. He smiled back and held his wife tightly to him. As he said goodbye, he admonished Kelly 1,000 times to take care of herself. Vanessa racked her brain to watch her daughter. Both women nodded in agreement. Yes, they were worried too. Past losses were still in the back of their minds, but there was also hope. What if it was the 1%? Kelly believed, and Vanessa. Where could she go? She supported her daughter too, and Ethan believed. 3 months later, he came home. A month he was home. Kelly had gotten so much prettier with the pregnancy. She was having a boy. Ethan didn't even talk to Kelly about what they would name their son. They each prayed for that 1%. And then Ethan took Kelly to the city. She was admitted to the city perinatal center 5 months before the birth. The doctors were worried sick too. Ethan went to work and called his wife every day. Kelly was calm, the pregnancy was going well. And then the time came. Ethan just sensed that Kelly was going into labor. Her heart was pounding and her cell phone was silent. Her mom doesn't know anything yet, tearfully answered Vanessa. They only said that they took her to the mouth of the hall. And for almost 24 hours, nothing was known. Then a text message came from Kelly. Our favorite boy was born all right. Ethan was so happy. And then he wondered why no height. No weight? So he started calling. Phones unavailable. Vanessa didn't know much more than that. She was worried about him too. Ethan barely got an excuse from his boss and rushed home. One day on the train, Vanessa met him at the station. They're discharging him tomorrow. Kelly's with the baby, she blurted out when they met. Why didn't Kelly say anything? Still no answer on the phone. Ethan was worried. Yeah, there's something wrong with her phone. Oh, don't worry about it. They're fine. I've been talking to Kelly on the landline. Vanessa calmed him down. Ethan got some rest from the road. Then he started up his old 9, dropped off his discharge stuff, and headed into town to pick up his wife and son. Never would he forget that moment. when Kelly walked into the emergency room with the baby in her arms. The baby was in a parade envelope with a blue bow. Kelly, so haggard, pale, and kind of trying to smile, but it was crooked. "Is everything all right?" Ethan asked, kissing his wife. "Yes, my darling, it's all right." Kelly nodded and buried her face in the envelope with her son. "Kelly, why do you cry?" "It's okay." Ethan killed his wife, then gently took his son in his arms, looked at his face, smiled. "Go back to sleep, Jack." "Jack?" Tanya was surprised. "Let's call our son that. Ivan is a beautiful Russian name." "I don't mind. Let it be Anechka." Kelly agreed. They drove home without adventure. The son behaved calmly, and then he did not give his parents any problems. He grew up healthy and strong. True, Kelly and Ethan spent the first year practically sleeping at the crib around the clock. They listened anxiously to see if he was breathing in the pain of previous losses. But all was well. The doctors all said the baby was perfectly healthy. Our 1%. Ethan said happily, looking at his sleeping son. "Jack is my darling." He loved his little boy so much he couldn't tell. And Kelly was cheerful and happy now. She's a mom. Jack grew up at a year, went to 2, already clapped simple words. Only his parents couldn't figure out which one he looked more like. "I think his eyes are blue like Ethan's, but his nose is a little snub nose like Kelly's and his hair's a little curly. But Kelly and Ethan have perfectly straight hair." "Did you forget about Grandpa?" Vanessa remembered. "Kelly, your father had a bit of a course too, didn't he?" Kelly was smiling. "Yes, son, I scraped a little from everywhere." Ethan laughed, picking up the baby in his arms and tossing him up, and catching him right away. And Jack was laughing, showing everyone his strong, even teeth. Yes, and they were all really happy now. Ethan kept going out on shifts, bringing in good money. They bought a nice car, renovated the house. Ethan bought a fur coat. Kelly was still arguing. Why would she do that? She's still on maternity leave anyway. Ethan laughed. And his wife has to be the most beautiful. And you can't have a fur coat. Kelly, and you should be the best hugger, Ethan, but in a fur coat, you're second to none. And they both laughed. Fate sent a new trial. Kelly was sick. She was lethargic. Headache, sometimes nausea. At first, she wrote it off as fatigue. A little kid's a lot of trouble. Then I thought maybe I was pregnant again. But no, it wasn't confirmed. The doctors sent her to the city, and only there they realized the cause of Kelly's indisposition. She was found to have a pancreatic tumor, and it was already the 3rd stage, and maybe even the 4th. Surgery would do no good, the doctors said. It was too late. The tricky thing about this tumor was that it was undetectable at an early stage. And now it was no longer an opera. The doctors suggested a course of chemo, though they honestly said there was little chance. After learning of her diagnosis, Kelly couldn't believe this was all happening to her. No, she couldn't be sick. She's young, healthy, strong. She has no right to be sick because she has a young son. What's he going to do without her? And then she realized it was all true and she was going to die. Kelly refused chemo. Why? Ethan yelled. When he came home from his shift, "Kelly, this is a chance. You can't think of yourself that way, so think of me. What's there to think about me? You have a little boy, and he needs you." "He does." Kelly echoed him. "But there's nothing you can do. You realize this chemo's only gonna get me so far. I'm gonna have to be in the hospital all the time. I know that as a medical professional, and I want the time that I have at home with you and my son." Ethan cried then, hugged his wife, and Kelly cried on his shoulder. As the month went on, she felt more or less herself. Ethan even had the feeling that the doctors had made a mistake. Kelly, healthy. She had been so busy around the house, spending all her time with her son. And then she suddenly became weak and collapsed. Vanessa came to live with them, looked after the water. She was crying in secret. She knew her daughter was leaving. Ethan didn't want to believe it. He stayed by his wife's side to the end. The last night, he went to Kelly. It was as if she were asleep. Ethan adjusted the blanket and sat down next to the bed on a chair. Kelly opened her eyes and whispered to Kelly, "Where is Jack?" "He's with his mom, don't worry. He's already tucked up for bed." Ethan answered her affectionately. You go to sleep too, sweetheart. Ethan, I want to tell you. Sit down, Kelly said. Do you have to know? What? Kelly suddenly stiffened with a cough. Ethan lifted her pillow, gave her a drink. Kelly, rest, Ethan. I'm leaving. Kelly whispered again at Anya's. Don't hurt him, please. What are you talking about? He's my son. Yeah, your son. Ours. In a terrified voice, Kelly whispered and closed her eyes. Ethan didn't immediately realize she was gone. He thought she'd fallen asleep. When he touched her, he realized she wasn't breathing. After Kelly Ethan's funeral, he wasn't himself for a month. Got drunk a few times and then picked himself up in the form of Jack's scared eyes. The baby still couldn't understand where Mom had gone. He cried a lot. Vanessa herself barely kept on her feet from the grief she had experienced, but she kept a close eye on her grandson and was always there for him. Ethan. One day she said to her son-in-law, I understand it's hard for you, but take pity on your son. And all I do is wipe away tears. You're drinking, he's little, and he needs your fatherly attention. It's like Ethan woke up, hid his pain inside. He started spending more time with his son, playing with him, and it seemed to get easier. Jack asked less and less about Kelly. I forgot a little bit. And then Ethan went north again. I need the money. Vanessa said she'd watch her son. Will you go? She said to Ethan before she left, don't think about anything, and you'll find another woman. You know I won't resist. And I know you loved Kelly, but that's life. A man can't be alone for long. I don't need anyone but my son. Ethan brushed it off. Indeed, he didn't need anyone. Up north he worked and worked. There were women there too, and some very pretty ones looked at him. But he paid no attention to them. All his thoughts were on his son. And when the bosses announced that they would dismiss everyone until February, he was so happy. He was the first of the brigade to buy a train ticket and go to Jack. But before that I went to a toy store near the station, and there was this huge polar bear. Ethan saw it and he was so excited. That's the one he's gonna give to the bank. He made good money. He got home early in the morning. Vanessa was in the kitchen making the kettle and putting on the potatoes and frying them. Ethan looked in on his sleeping son, admiring him. How he'd grown up over the months his boy had grown up. I would see them, Kelly. Ethan put the bear next to the bed and went into the kitchen. It's the matinee at daycare today, Vanessa said. Making tea. You'll go, of course. Ethan nodded eagerly. What time? Midnight. Jack's looking forward to the party. He's going to be a bunny. I made him a costume, and he looks so handsome. Thank you. Ethan said. If it weren't for you, I don't know what I'd be doing. No other way, Ethan. Jack, it's the only thing I have left in there. As long as I breathe, I'll be with you. But you just remember what I said. You'll find another woman. I won't resist. Just find one who won't hurt our jar, who loves us. Vanessa, I've already told you no one. Dinner, Ethan said stubbornly. Well, we'll see, Vanessa sighed. And then they heard the surprised exclamation of Jack's bedroom. His scream and then a cry. Ethan and Vanessa raced to the baby. Jack was sitting on the bed, lying against the wall with frightened eyes. Watching the bear, Daddy cried out, Baby, seeing your father, you've arrived. Who's that? Son, it's a toy. Bear, are you scared or what? She kissed her son on his warm cheek. Baby, I'm sorry, I wasn't thinking. I thought you were happy. Look how healthy he is. I wasn't scared out of my wits with Jack's head. I was confused. When I fell asleep, there was no one there. And here he is. So Santa Claus gave it to you? Ethan smiled. I was on the train, and he comes in and says, Give this to Jack. He's been good this year. That's why he got the big toy. That's all he said. Jack clapped his eyes shut. What else? Ethan was confused. Well, hello from Mom. At least I'm so excited to see her. I dreamed about her today. Ethan didn't say anything, but held his son tighter to him. What can I say? Even a wizard as powerful as Santa Claus can't bring Mommy back. She will only come to us in dreams, he whispered to the child. Then he shook it all off, smiled, and sat his son on his lap. You have a holiday today, don't you? I guess it's time to get ready. Aha, smiled Jack. It's time. I'll be the bunny. Wow, that's so cool. What good did Jack do all of a sudden? I wanted to be a wolf, but only a bad wolf will be a wolf and a good bunny? Ethan was surprised. No, your part's better, definitely. Are you thinking with doubt? Asked the boy. And then he remembered something else. We were also told that a new boy is coming to the party today. Where did he come from? Oh yes, Vanessa remembered. We have a new employee at the club, an art director or something. Vasilina. Our old artistic director ran away on the eve of the holidays. They say she went to the city with her lover. There's so much work in the club. The director of the club went to the district center and tearfully asked the culture department to help. So they sent this girl. Is she from the city? Her grandmother lives in the district center. She agreed to come to us. They gave her a room at the club until spring. There's central heating there. She's alone with the baby. Well, her son is coming today. We haven't seen him yet. The teachers told us that we have a new addition. She brought him back from the district center last night. I heard him half an ear. He wasn't interested at all. It's a visiting artist. He was thinking about how his bathhouse would feel at the feast. All the kids mostly come with their moms. They'll see it too. Remember Kelly? At least he didn't start crying. It's okay. The boys will take over with Vanessa someday. Half an hour before the party, Ethan, Vanessa, and his son were already at the daycare center. Jack obediently put on the bunny costume. Vanessa helped Ethan next to him. In short, they were busy, as were other parents who also took their children well. And so the kids ran all to the hall. The teacher gathered them in a circle, gave the last instructions how to behave. Adults sat on a chair and patiently waited for the beginning of the holiday. Where is the new boy? Remembered suddenly one of the parents something is not visible. Exactly all of our confirmed in response all just shrugged. And then a young pretty woman looked into the hall. Did not start yet to blame, she smiled at the teacher. We were a little late. At the school, Yelka I helped there. Now Peter to change. Well, 5 minutes is good. And ran to the locker room. Everyone realized that this is the girl who was sent to help the cultural workers at the club. It seems even her name, whispered one of the parents alone with a child. The boy is 4 years old. One restlessly interjected the other and looked suspiciously at the door behind which Molly had disappeared. What is she like in behavior? Who knows what she's like? Laughing back at her. We'll see. But you gotta keep your men strong. She's such a bright figure skater. And Ethan looked up, winked at a man. His neighbor's grandmother Wendy, who came to her granddaughter's party. You're the only one. I'm fine with that, Ethan replied glumly. And no one else dared to say a word to him. Vanessa lowered her eyes, thinking of her daughter. Wendy's grandmother realized she'd said something stupid and frowned too. There was silence. The music started to play. Caregivers and nannies seated the kids across from the entrance. The performance participants, including Jack, were led into the hallway. It was funny how kids in costumes, bunnies, mice, foxes, and other animals pulled a rope to the exit. Parents smiled looking at their children. And then the hall was plowed into. The very Molly and the boy's nanny picked up the boy, smiled, and stood there for a second, confused. She shifted her gaze to the parents. Looked at Ethan for some reason, he thought. Then the woman took the child to a free chair. Many parents looked curiously at Molly, who was nestled in a corner, and did not immediately see the boy. Ethan sat as if he had been hit on the head with a bag. A boy who looked just like Jack had just been brought into the room. Ethan even thought it was his son at first. Same blue eyes. Slightly snub nose. Only Jack's hair was only slightly cropped. This kid had a whole bunch of long locks. Vanessa sat puzzled too. Ethan, I don't understand, she whispered. I must have something wrong with my eyes. That boy looks so much like our Jack. I must have something wrong with my eyes too. He answered her quietly. He looked at Molly. She was sitting still, smiling at her son, waving, and he was smiling back at her. Some of the parents finally got a look at the baby too. Ethan, how Molly looks just like your Jack, whispered Grandma Wendy and unceremoniously added, yours does he? Don't talk nonsense, Ethan hissed. He was on pins and needles. He wanted to jump out of his seat and find out who Molly was, but it was stupid. Ethan sat tensely, taking his eyes off the boy. Many of the parents were also looking at the boy, at his mom, at Ethan, and whispering. And then the show started and everyone was distracted. A Grinch surrounded the Christmas tree. The kids were acting out the show. Then came the kind Santa. Then the children read poems, sang songs. Jack was having a good time. You could see that he was very comfortable in his bunny suit. And the mask on his face did not interfere at all. And then all the children went to the Christmas tree to dance a round dance, including those who sat on a chair. Their new boy went too. He happened to stand next to Jack. They held hands and pulled into the woods. Herringbone. Apparently Jack became uncomfortable singing after all, and he lifted his mask to his forehead. Everyone in the audience once again fixed their eyes on the two little boys. Jack and Peter looked like two drops of water. Ethan was looking at them too. The man was at a complete loss and shifted his gaze from his son to his neighbor. Then Ethan looked at Daria across her defeated and confused street. He realized that there was some mystery he didn't know about yet. After the party, parents and children were going home in friendship. The children joyful, parents satisfied. Only a lot of them. They would look curiously at Ethan and Jack, and then at Daria and Peter. Vanessa, as if trying to shield her grandson from prying eyes, stood nearby, helping Jack. Molly was quickly dressing her son without looking at anyone. Ethan, too, pretended that nothing had happened. He decided to talk later, without witnesses, with this girl he didn't know. On the way home, Jack chatted nonstop. "Nice party," he said excitedly. "And Santa Claus is so kind. He gave me so much candy. And the new boy, have you seen him? His name is Peter. I met him when we were out walking. He gave me a Chupa Chups and I gave him gum. He reminds me of someone. I don't understand." My father and grandmother listened silently, nodding their heads, each thinking about one thing. I think Vanessa was the first to start talking to Ethan. Maybe this boy is a doppelganger. I mean, they say it can happen. Vanessa, do you believe that? Ethan shook his head. I don't believe in such fairy tales. And did you see Molly's face? I mean, she's commanding everything. She was afraid of something. I don't understand. Jack is ours. Kelly gave birth to him. Maybe she didn't have to, and the doctors didn't see it. Ethan said sarcastically, and I realized that could have happened in the early 20th century. I have one baby Kelly was carrying now. Yeah, you're right. Then how do you explain everything? Vanessa looked desperately into the next room where Jack was sorting through a pile of candy. Jack is my grandson and my son, Ethan answered firmly. And I'm going to go to that firm now and find out. He ran out of the house, throwing on his jacket as he went. He almost ran to the club, ignoring the passers-by who looked at him curiously. The whole village was buzzing that Ethan had gone out with another girl at the same time he was living with Kelly. And he'd hurt her baby too. And she's here now. I never thought Ethan would cheat on Kelly, whispered the women, looking after Ethan. Kelly looked so decent and stubbornly carried her in his arms. Jack loves her so much. Turns out he's a dog like the rest of them, and she knew about it. You'd think Kelly was dead and came rushing over here. No shame, no conscience. I feel sorry for Vanessa. How's she gonna feel knowing Ethan was lying to her daughter? That's okay, but the kids are like two brothers now. Young people go out and don't realize what happens afterwards. And the children will have to deal with it later. In short, the village has already decided everything. Ethan's fault. Molly is one hell of a girl. A lot of people have already made predictions. Vanessa's the front runner. Now she'll curse her son-in-law and she'll be right. Better yet, Jack will take her in. You can't trust one man like Ethan with your son. And even that one needs a soot or tar on the door. But where can I get him? And the chairman of the village council won't be happy. The door is government property. Why did he put Molly in the clubhouse? That's how you take it, without knowing the person. Meanwhile, in the room at the club, Molly was frantically putting her things in her suitcase. Little Peter was looking at his mom in bewilderment. Mommy, she doesn't want to leave here. the child barely holding back tears. I like the idea of a Christmas tree, not a present. Santa Claus gave it to me. Son, you can't stay here. Nearly crying herself, the woman answered, It's not good for us here. The bus will be here in 2 hours. We'll go to Grandma Clara, we'll go to the district center again. And then I'll think of something. I don't want Grandma Clara. The baby cried. She swears and hits me by the ear when I sit on her bed. You'll have to be patient, little one. Molly hugged her son and kissed his wet cheek. It won't be long. You and I are going into town. I'll call my aunt and she'll take us in. I don't want to leave here. Molly was ready to burst into tears. She could only hold it together. But she knew she had to get out of here. Suddenly there was a sharp knock on the door. Molly flinched and stared at the door. The same man from the matinee who had been staring at her the whole time was standing on the threshold. That boy's father. Good afternoon, he said. I'm Ethan. We need to talk. Hello, Molly said in a low voice. Don't worry, we'll be right out. You and your wife don't worry about a thing. My wife is dead. How? They're not anymore. She mumbled confusedly. Molly? No. Who the hell are you? Damn it, Ethan exclaimed. How do you know my wife? And how do you explain the fact that our sons look exactly alike? Next she turned to her son, then she turned belittling. Looked at Ethan. I'll explain everything to you. Just so the baby doesn't hear. Let's go to the auditorium. She turned to her son again. Peter, sunshine, you play. Here, draw your candy and eat it. I'll talk to my uncle now and come over. Peter, he nodded back. The boy kept worrying that soon he would have to leave here for evil Grandma Clara. Ethan and Molly walked into the auditorium. Ethan sat down in a chair. Molly continued to stand. She was gathering her thoughts and didn't know where to start. Yes, it was her secret, and she had lived with it all these years. But it was so hard it was just unbearable. And today, when she saw Jack, her heart clenched like a chain wrapped around her. She needs to talk. How do you know my wife? Ethan repeated the question. She and I were in the hospital together. Beaten? Molly said. And you took our second child? Ethan didn't believe what he was saying, but he had no other explanation for what was happening. I didn't take anyone, the woman almost whispered. And she gave her second son to your wife. Kelly had a dead baby then. How? Ethan cried out. This can't be. Jack is my son. I don't believe you. Well, you do. I'll tell you my story, and it's up to you to decide if it's true or not. And Molly told Ethan without elaboration, of course. But the story was actually longer and sadder. Molly grew up in an orphanage. Since childhood, she was a very artistic girl. So after high school, the question of where to go to school was not a problem. Molly went to the College of Arts. As an orphan, she was given a room in the dormitory. She studied easily. After graduation, she got a job in the House of Culture in the city, and there she was noticed by one of the rich men. He was a sponsor of various events. David was already over 50. Molly is just a girl, 22 years old. But the man could not humiliate her in any way. Girls did not give. Then Flowers sent her to work. Then at the House of Culture in the evenings, met in the evenings to give her a ride home offered. Even such intrusive attention was of no use. She, as best she could, refused the insistent advances of his suitors. That's why it's all only to further inflame. And again, he sent bouquets of candy and beckoned her to the restaurant. I do not understand you, Molly, said her friend Lucy, who worked in the same DC decorator. Such a man is running after you from the movie to Sworotit. If I had something like that, I would not hesitate to throw myself into his arms. Lucy, he's got a wife, kids grown up. His daughter's my age. I checked. Molly answered her. So you're interested in him after all. Lucy winked. Internet's a big help. They're all about this banker. David has a wife, has a chain of beauty salons. Son's a high school student. Daughter's 23, works at his bank. What do you care about his family? Let them live as before, and you'll be happy with them too. Maybe he'll buy his own apartment, move out of his bedbug. Molly, go for it. He's old and disgusting. How old is he? He's only 50. But she wouldn't even listen to her friend. One day Molly was coming home late at night from an event. Suddenly, a car pulled up next to the sidewalk, and two tough guys pushed her into the cabin. She was brought to some fancy country house, and David was waiting for her there. The table was set with wine, champagne. The owner himself was in a robe. "Sit down, Molly." The banker pointed her to a chair and then poured wine. "I've got you. How could you not resist? You understand, I can't be refused. I always get what I want, and I'm reporting you to the police." Molly replied in a trembling voice, "Are you going to jail?" "Me, for what?" David laughed at the top of his voice, "for helping poor fools in this life." "Molly, are you really stupid? I'll tell you the police." "Well, don't worry, I've got my own people there. My biggest boss is in debt. So go ahead, drink wine, eat fruit, relax. You and me, we got all night." He enjoyed his power over Molly, saw the fear in her eyes. And it amused him. And then he just abused her. And in the morning, he put her in the same car with the same right-wing guys, slipped a few 1,000s in her pocket, told her he'd call her tonight. "And don't you dare not pick up the phone." He hissed in her ear, "You're mine now. I'll make you queen if I want. Destroy you if I want." Molly cried the whole way. Not even sillier, only said one to her as they pulled up to the house. "You can't go against David. Do as he says." And Molly was crushed mentally and physically. It was so hard. She wanted to hide so no one would find her. But that evening there was a knock on her room. David stood on the doorstep, his fed-up, satisfied face. That's what it turned out to be. He was smiling, fat, hateful. Then Molly thought. Wanted to close the door in his face, but didn't have time. He put his foot in the opening. "Get ready quickly. We're going to my place," he said and winked. To the dacha. How disgusting it was. Poor girls. But it was you, Ethan, who acted on her like a deft hypnotist. She felt like a rabbit in front of a huge boa constrictor. And Molly went with him. Then they met a few more times. The banker was jubilant. He'd gotten what he wanted. And then he felt so miserable. She also felt dirty, like sheep and mocked. David was generous. He gave jewelry, flowers. People who saw Molly's new earrings or a ring only sighed enviously. What a lucky friend. And then it was all over in one day. Just at the cottage where Ethan took Molly, his wife showed up during a date. She didn't yell, didn't make a scene, just grinned. "You're doing it again, hubby." Ethan grabbed Molly and literally threw her out into the street. And then he fell at his wife's feet. He owed her too much. He built his whole business on her father. Of course, she forgave him. Wouldn't be the first time. And Molly, to be honest, she was glad she had. Now Ethan wouldn't be bothering her. And really, he'd had enough. No more calls, no more visits. Lucy was the only one upset. The old goat had dumped her friend Molly. She finally breathed a sigh of relief. It was deliverance. The earrings and rings Igor had given her, she wanted to throw them away at first. Lucy changed her mind. "Take them to a pawn shop," her friend advised. "Money is not superfluous." So Molly did. And for nothing. A week later, Ethan showed up at her door and demanded all the jewelry back. And when she found out that Molly had sold them for next to nothing, he was furious. "Are you gonna pay me for it?" he yelled. "You'll sell your dorm room and give me everything." Even sent him away. Finally, she was able to be brave with him. She didn't know why. She must have grown up. Only before, she was jubilant, feeling free. Pretty soon, Molly didn't feel well. She was very nauseous, especially in the mornings. "Girlfriend, are you okay?" Lucy asked her. Molly herself realized that she was probably the right one. The doctor at the antenatal clinic confirmed everything. "You're in your 7th week?" she said. It was a shock. A shock. Total incomprehension. What to do? Lucy gave her the address of a clinic where the problem could be solved in no time. And Molly went because she also realized that in this situation, it was the best option. The clinic even gave her a referral for an abortion. It was supposed to be done in 2 days. But it so happened that in the evening, Molly had a high fever, stomach ache, and she was taken to the hospital by ambulance. It turned out to be appendicitis. Molly had an operation, then a recovery period. Anyway, when Molly came to her senses, it was too late to abort. only to give birth. Why? Who would want that baby? So Molly had the courage to go to Ethan and tell him everything. Pregnant, he grinned in her face. You're a big girl, and I'm not interested in solving your own problems. But it's your baby. Why should I believe you? Who the hell are you, you backwoods mutt? You don't mess with respectable people with your bastard. And he left, even stood in horror, realizing that no one and nothing will help her in this life. Yes, she would have to solve her own problems. And a week later, David's wife came to her room. I heard from my husband that you were going to have a baby with him, she asked with a grin. I shouldn't. You must realize that David will never recognize this child. And I don't ask anything from him or you. Molly replied with a shake of her head. You're the one who's so brave and proud now that your puppy will be born. Eat differently, sneered through his teeth guests. Here's the deal. Get out of this town so that your spirit will not be here. After 3 days, I realized that Molly was calmly looking at this lady in expensive clothes and was not afraid of her at all. Or you'll regret that you were born. Hissed this onto her, and she left, slamming the door. But even seriously did not take her threat. She went on living her life in peace. One night, 3 guys in masks burst into her room, dragged her off the bed. They took some papers out of a folder they brought with them and made Molly sign them. She never realized what she had signed. And in the morning, the new owners of her room came and showed her the sale papers. In vain. Molly claimed that she had signed everything under duress and had not received any money. The police wouldn't even listen to her. It turned out that she was even on the street alone, pregnant, and without money. Where to live? Work, and that's where Lucy helped. She was renting a small studio, and she took a friend in. What to do next? Well, there was some exciting new news ahead. You're having twins? Said the doctor at her regular appointment. The twosome burst into tears. What's next? Why I can't. You can. Sweetheart, smiled the doctor. All the more reason for you not to worry so much. You don't even have to give birth yourself. Given your recent surgery, you'll have to have a cesarean section. Wake up. You already have 2 cripples. She was walking out of the hospital on the wrong side of the road. How could she get so screwed up? She got pregnant by a scumbag and had twins. So don't worry, Lucy reassured her when she found out. We'll get through this. That's easy for you to say. What am I supposed to do now? Where am I gonna live with 2 kids and what am I gonna raise them on? I could be a pain in the ass forever. You should put them in the birth center. That's Lucy's advice. Are you serious? Molly's mouth dropped open at that suggestion. No, but what can I do? Think about it, you need them. No, if they were at least from a loved one or from a decent man, then from the last bastard. My wife, my children, Lucy. I myself grew up in an orphanage and do not want such a fate for my children. And that bad you were there on everything ready and gave you a place to live. I lost. Thoughtfully added Molly. It's okay. You will give birth to these children. Leave them in the maternity hospital. A new life will begin. Everything will be fine. Friend. And you will forget it as a terrible dream. Her friend encouraged her, and Molly realized that Lucy was right. Why would she want these kids? Who's their father? She shuddered every time she thought of Fat Banker. No, there was nothing to tie them together. So Molly decided to leave the children at the maternity hospital. But time went by Rose, her belly with it awakened and maternal feelings of a young woman. She gently stroked the animals, smiled when the babies moved inside. No, it didn't hurt. It even felt good. It was as if the butterflies were moving their wings. 2 beautiful boys, said the doctor at the next ultrasound. Her 2 sons, she won't give them to anyone. By childbirth. She even decided she'd turn the world upside down. But she put the babies on their feet herself. They won't grow up in an orphanage. He didn't tell Ludmila about his plans. And everything later. A week before the scheduled cesarean, she went to the hospital. She and Kelly met in the ward. Before the birth, Kelly also walked the last few days. She was very nervous. This is my 4th child. Kelly confided in Molly. You have such a big family. Molly was surprised. Unfortunately, said the new acquaintance bitterly and told Kelly her story. This time it will be okay. Molly reassured her. Kelly only nodded slightly in response. She was afraid to say anything so she wouldn't jinx it. One day they took Molly away for surgery, and Kelly with the folds. When it was over and Molly was released from the ICU to a regular room, it turned out that Kelly was her roommate. Kelly was lying with her back turned to the wall and crying quietly. Molly looked at her anxiously and realized everything. "It's bad," she asked. "It couldn't be worse." Kelly exclaimed. "He didn't make it. My son, just a breath of air, and he died. How could he be? God, I begged you so hard to keep him alive." "Kelly, honey, don't cry." Molly turned to Kelly, writhing in pain. "It's gonna get better." "It's not gonna get better." Kelly cried out. "This is the fourth baby I've mourned." "You know the fourth. It's not my husband who's scared to tell my mom. I don't know how to say it. I mean, they're waiting and hoping too. He's small, but he's already in the morgue. It's scary. David is pathetic. He wants to be a father so badly, but it's not working out. He's the problem. But I'll never leave him. I won't betray him. Can you imagine telling him again that the baby didn't make it? He's had a breakdown before. He used to drink because he felt inadequate. And now I'm strong again. I can handle it. I'm scared for Ethan." Molly listened to her confession, and a plan suddenly formed in her head. She had 2 healthy babies. She hasn't seen them yet, but the doctor said the boys are perfectly healthy. But how can she manage with 2? No place to live, no money. "Kelly, I'll give you one of mine," she said huskily. "You will." "What are you talking about?" Kelly gasped. "Borrow it. It'll be hard on either of them. I'm already living at my friend's house on a bird's license. She told me to give them to an orphanage. I can't do that. They're my blood. I can't give them to a foster home like puppies. So I'm thinking, with 1 baby my friend will take me in, but with 2 I don't think so. And then at least they'll take me. I see you're a good person and your husband is not bad. My boy will be fine with you." "Well, according to you, I don't know," Kelly whispered in confusion. And they stayed up all night, vouchsafed. One thought about whether she would be able to accept another man's child, and the other whether she would give away her own blood, whether her leg would not burst, or whether her heart would burst from the pain. Toward morning, Kelly called Molly in a whisper. "Are you asleep?" "No." Short answer next. "And I've decided I'm gonna take your boy. Only let's make sure that no one knows anything, neither your acquaintances nor my family. I gave birth to a healthy baby for my husband and mom." "Yes, I agree. But the doctor has to be persuaded to change the children's documents. It's difficult." "But it can be done," Molly replied. She remembered that she had a small gift from David, a diamond ring. She hadn't taken it to the pawn shop, and when Ethan demanded her jewelry back, she just couldn't find it. The ring rolled under the lining of her bag. Then she found it. Now it might have come in handy. "Do you have any idea what you're asking me to do?" The doctor yelled at them in his office when the women told him what they were asking. "Okay, Molly's young, stupid. But you, Kelly, you're a medical professional. You realize that's basically impossible." "I understand, but I want to be a mother. I'm tired of mourning my children. This is a chance. So go to the orphanage, take the baby there." The doctor shook his head. "No, I can't, and I refuse to have children." Suddenly, Molly said in a ringing voice, "Molly, there's nothing wrong with your head. 2 beautiful boys, how can you?" The doctor stared at the young mother in bewilderment. "I can't raise them alone, much less 2. Please don't let me do something irreparable. I will take 1 child and give the other to Kelly for good. I can feel it. My boy will be in good hands." And she walked over to the table and put the ring down. Without saying anything, she walked out of the office. Kelly walked out with her. Both of them were hurt and heavy at heart. Nothing had worked out. And an hour later, the door opened and the nurse brought out 2 packages. "What's up, mommies?" "Taking in the little ones?" the woman said cheerfully. She looked at the tag of one of the other 2 and immediately handed Kelly and Molly each a baby. The women stared at each other perplexed. Then each looked at the baby. A few moments later, each was feeding their baby. "He looks just like me." Molly smiled, looking at the baby sleeping in her arms. Immediately, the smile slid off her face. She looked at the baby in Kelly's arms. She understood the look and held the baby tighter in her arms. "Did you promise?" Paler, she whispered. "I remember, I just wanted to see which one." Kelly pleaded. "Let it be my son." "You're right. It is your son." She whispered further and closed her eyes. A tear rolled down her cheek. She never saw her other boy. By evening, they were separated into different wards. That's what the doctor had decided. It was the right thing to do. Why make the poor women suffer even more? He'd done enough to help them. When Kelly was discharged with the baby, there was even more left in the hospital. She stood at the window and watched Kelly walk with her second son to the car. There was a tall man next to me. He was smiling happily, saying something to Kelly. Then they got into an old 9 and drove away. Where Molly didn't know. Kelly didn't say where she came from. Just mentioned she lived somewhere in the region, that's all. But she didn't even need to know. She'd made up her mind. Her other boy would be happy in another family. She'd raise that baby. Unheard, the doctor walked over to her. He too watched Kelly leave. "You don't have any regrets?" Quietly he asked Molly. The young mother flinched in surprised no, shook her head. "Kelly will be a good mom." "I hope we did the right thing, girls," sighed the doctor. And then he pulled that ring out of his robe pocket. "Take it. You're gonna need it." And left the room, and then looked at him with gratitude. What good doctor? Lucy was picking up Molly and the baby from the hospital. Of course, her friend was a little dumbfounded when she found out that she had even decided to keep the baby. But to be honest, deep down she approved of her act. During this time, Lucy herself thought a lot about this situation, even imagined herself in Molly's place. And she realized that giving up her child was not so easy. It's good to have one. Lucy thought to herself. She even consoled her friend and wondered how she reacted calmly to the death of the second baby. Lucy decided that Molly was even glad. Yes, in her situation, it was the best option. Peter was growing up. He was a calm and affectionate little healthy baby, and that made her very happy. To her surprise, Molly realized that she didn't see her son as David's baby at all. It was only her baby, and she did everything to ensure that the boy did not need anything. When he was 6 months old, she started working, hosting parties, corporate events. At this time with Peter, Lucy sat. A friend turned out to be a good nanny, but she also had her own life. No, she never once accused Molly of embarrassing her. The young mother herself realized that she had to solve her housing issues. In a year, she gave Peter a 5-day week and started working twice or even 3 times as much. She took a lot of orders. Sometimes she came to Lucy's apartment and collapsed from fatigue. But it was necessary to work so that Peter did not need anything. But then Molly realized that in such a rhythm, her baby grows abandoned and unhappy. Who would want him there? At daycare for 5 days on weekends when she picks him up. After all, again we have to leave for weddings and birthdays. But there's no other way. After all, in the House of Culture, where Molly used to work, she was fired, as then she was whispered on the call of some influential person, who Molly didn't ask. She knew it was either Ethan or his wife, so she lived in a frenzied rhythm with a constant sense of guilt in front of her son. But one day everything changed. In a district center far from the regional center, an aunt fell ill. Harmful. She's old, Lucy told me. But my mother owes her a sister. A relative, after all. She used to borrow money from my mom a lot. And now she can barely walk around the house. No kids, no husband, not even a cat. I'm telling you, she's mad as hell. So she asked her mom to look after her. Maybe they left there a long time ago to move to a neighboring district. Not my mother, not my father. They don't want a social worker. My aunt is driving me away. My mother calls me, crying, doesn't know what to do. Aunt Clara doesn't want to move in either. I thought of something. What if you go there? There's a kindergarten and a new club there. She'll take you in. Where will she go? You'll have a place to live and a job. And the main thing is to keep an eye on the aunt. She won't let us in. Molly hesitated. We're strangers to her. That's my problem. I'll convince her. Otherwise, I'll tell her I'll turn her into the Mercy Home. I winked at Lucy. I just need you to agree. I guess so. Shrugged her shoulders further. I have few options. I'm so tired around here, and Peter's always crying at daycare. It's hard to go 5 days without a mom. Exactly. Anyway, it's a deal. I call my aunt. Lucy's happy. I don't know how Lucy persuaded her stubborn aunt, but she also agreed. True was very indignant that the baba with a child will be, but then stopped talking when she heard that the only other option is a shelter for old people. And so even with Peter rode in the train, the boy was happy. Would he really see his mom every day now? They're only on weekends. Tetron must 5 days. Sometimes he'd get up and whisper to Molly for the 100th time. No, never again, Molly assured him. The woman cradled her son in her arms and thought about the fact that despite all the difficulties, she is happy. She has her baby, her meaning of life, her joy, her hope. And everything will work out for them. Did Molly ever think about her second child? Of course she did. Sometimes the ache in her chest would recoil. But Molly forbade herself any memory of those events in the hospital. She never told anyone, not even Ludmilla, and she never would. Her second son didn't survive. Then that was the end of it. They got off at a small station after a huge city. They seemed to be muffled. Silence. The scenery was striking. Small houses, narrow streets. But that was out of habit. But as it was, this district center was the most ordinary one. There are 1,000 of them all over the country. Without difficulty, they found on the right street a wooden house with carved shutters and an iron fence. This is where Clara lived. She opened the door. A woman about 70 years old, full-figured. With a disgruntled face, she noted to herself, she's not so helpless. She can get around quite well. She could just lose some weight. But that's none of her business. Thanks for taking me in. So it was the duck who sent you to me with her look, Clara said. All right, you live for now. We'll see what happens. There's your room and the kids are comfortable. Tell your boy to work hard and not to run and shout in the room. Let him sit down and that's all. And that you don't stay there too long. It's time for me to heat the stove and cook. Let's get a move on. Having said all this in a commanding tone, Clara went to the living room, where she turned on the TV at full power. Peter was sleepy from the road. But did anyone sleep? Okay, son, you'll be patient. You'll go to the daycare center. You'll sleep well there, whispered Molly. Mom, you promised. Peter with tears from truancy, from his mother. You said you wouldn't put me in a 5-day program. It's not a 5-day program, Molly assured her. I'll take you home every night. Right here. This is our home. Now it's true. You promise. The child looked at his mom incredulously. I promise, she smiled further. We just have to find more of that daycare center. And now you keep quiet, Grandma. Don't worry. The boy nodded in response. The room was cramped with one bed, creaking plywood, and 3 legs over a table. A small window in an old wooden frame. And that was happiness. They had their own corner. Molly quickly laid out her things and went to hostessing. And everything would be fine, but she didn't know how to heat the stove. Oh, and then she heard from Clara and the inept. And no hands. And why did she even listen to the boat? She listened to the rest of it in silence. She watched Clara working in the stove and understood everything from the first time. And then she cooked a delicious borscht and Clara ate 2 portions. Peter also had a good meal from the road. And she herself was so tired that she only showed like a bird. You okay? Eat normally, said Clara. But your boy, she eats like a horse. Bypasses me completely. What are you? Are you offended further? He's just a little kid. He's just hungry from the road. Don't worry, I'll buy groceries with my own money. I'm going to work. Peter in the garden. We won't bother you. I don't get it. Clara's confused. What do you mean, work? Watching me. I'll manage everything. I'll do my chores in the morning, eat, and come back in the evening. Lucy told you so. Told you so. Boiled it, Clara said. The devil made me take strangers into the house. Lucy, you bastard. And something else. She went to her room. Mommy, I'm afraid of her. Whispered Peter. Don't be afraid, little one. Grandma is nice. She just grumbles. Molly smiled a little, though she was also uneasy. They're not very hospitable. This is Clara. The next day, she went to the local house of culture, then to the kindergarten. In the House of Culture, she was offered only a place as a cleaner, and that was because no one would work for those pennies. There in the evenings when the disco had to work in the check room for free. But Peter promised to take her to the kindergarten at once. Only local registration was required. Where to get it? It's a vicious circle, Molly decided. As long as she takes her son to work with her, she'll work as a cleaner. What could she do? Of course, that's not what she had in mind. But what happened? Molly's new life began. She got up at 5 o'clock, cooked breakfast for her mistress, then stoked the stove, then ran to the club. While her son slept, she'd clean up and come back for dinner. Peter would sit in his room, drawing or playing with cars. Only quietly Molly taught him not to disturb his grandmother. Until evening, the woman did the housework, and then again went to work, taking Peter with her. They often returned at midnight, when the club closed after all kinds of events and discos. The club manager Lola turned a blind eye to the fact that the new cleaner often took her son with her. She saw that the girl was doing her best. Moreover, she's a colleague with her education. "Molly, be patient," Lola said. "As soon as there is a place, I'll get you a place in the kindergarten and I'll give you another month." Wait, Molly smiled gratefully at her, and that's how she lived. In November, it became hard to carry Peter to work with her in the evenings. It was cold to walk down the street. I decided to talk to the landlady. "He won't bother you," she assured me. "Clara will sit in the room, and that's all." "All right, let him stay." The old woman relented. She was satisfied with the house warm, clean, always tasty, and cooked a lot. And the boy to restrain him, if anything. So Molly started leaving the boy with Clara. At first she didn't notice anything, but then she realized that her boy became fearful. Then she saw bruises on his arm. Turned out to be an old woman. She punishes him for every extra step, pulls his ear, or slaps him. Once Peter forgot himself, played, and went into her room. The old woman pinched his arm and pinched him several more times for small, as it seemed to her, provinces. That's what Molly's son told her later when she saw the bruises. "Why didn't you say anything?" Almost crying, Molly asked. "I was afraid to upset you, not childishly," seriously answered Peter. "It's already hard for you." Molly had a big fight with Clara, and the old woman's only answer was, "If you don't like it, go away." And it's kind of a sticking point. In one of the villages, just before New Year's Eve, the position of artistic director became available. "But you'll have to live at the club. Will you come?" asked Lola. "I'll go," Molly answered decisively. The same day she called Ludmila and explained the situation with her aunt. "Apologized, friend." "Not apologizing," sighed Lucy. "It is I still have to apologize to you for such an aunt." "Well, let her live her life as she pleases. I think she's more fooled than sick. She's moved on. Then she'll live all the more alone." Lucy grinned. The next day Molly and Peter went to the village. Clara swore at them for being ungrateful. It was Molly who lived with her like a cheese and butter. But of course Clara was more sorry for Molly's free help, and the apartment paid her rent. Molly liked the village. The streets are smooth. Lots of new houses and friendly people. The club director brought her old furniture to the room and personally ran to the kindergarten and arranged for the new employee's son to be taken there. "Already going to the Christmas tree tomorrow," said Lola, the head of the club, and held her gaze on Peter, who sat on a chair and looked curiously at their new home with his mother. "What a cute little boy you have. Does he look like you?" "Yes," Molly smiled. "Is there a resemblance? Does he remind me of anyone else?" Lola wondered. "Well, all kids look alike in some way. That's for sure." Molly laughed. "Thank you, Lola." "For what?" "For everything. Shelter. For help." Lola winked and ran off on her own. And the next day, Molly went to the Christmas tree at the daycare center with her son. And there she had this unexpected encounter. Of course, she didn't tell Ethan the details of her life. She just said she was almost out on the street with no money. Pregnant, double. How did you meet Kelly? And how she decided to take that step. She also told me how she wanted to make a life for herself in a new place. "We're leaving with Peter," she said, wiping away her tears. "I won't disrupt your life. We'll get on the bus and leave." "Where? Anywhere? I realize we're not wanted here." Now we'll start talking. People have seen how much the boys look alike. And I don't think it's going to be fun, Ethan grinned. He thought about it. Jack wasn't his own. Ethan couldn't believe it until now. But he thought back to when he'd welcomed Kelly home from the maternity ward. How lost and upset she'd been then. Looking at him like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. And before she died. I mean, she obviously wanted to confess, but she didn't or couldn't. Before Kelly lied to him. That thought burned him. It hurt more that Jack wasn't his son, though. Ethan sat with his head down. Molly stood across from him. She pressed her back against the wall and cried. She thought back to the events of her life. Yes, things had gotten messy for her. It was too bad for Peter. Where would they go now on New Year's Eve? To the city? Lucy would take them in, but she's got her own life. And she seems to have a man, Clara. Peter's had enough of that mean old woman. But there's nowhere else to go. Clara has to go back. I wish she'd accept it. Peter came into the hall. He looked with surprise at his crying mother and sad uncle. Mommy, I'm hungry, he said pitifully. Oh yes, son. Molly perked up. Now I'll go to the store. I'll buy some sausages and some seeds for a quick fire. We've got a bus coming. She was about to leave, but Ethan stopped her. The store's out of business, the man said. Ethan stood up and walked over to Molly, looking her in the eye. Well, where are you going? And it's like running away, isn't it? And it is. Molly whispered, but there was no other way. Come and join us. Ethan suddenly suggested it. Vanessa, I was going to make soup today. Your place. Molly was confused. But Ethan took Molly's hand and looked into her eyes again. Don't you want to see him, to communicate with him? Molly lowered her head. She understood who Ethan was talking about, and she really wanted to see her Jack. To see how he lived. She wanted to hug him. But could she? She'd made her choice once. I want to, she whispered. Then let's go a little, Ethan said sharply. Stop thinking, your son is hungry. He had switched to the first name imperceptibly. They walked through the village, not noticing all the cuckoos looking at them from the window or the yard. But Ethan didn't care at all. The only thought in his head was he right to let Molly see the jar? And yet Jack was his son, though not his own by blood. But Ethan was raising him and wouldn't give him to anyone. Will he regret that impulse? And then there's Vanessa, who doesn't know anything yet. Vanessa met them in the hallway. She stared at Ethan, uncomprehending. Molly stood hesitantly at the threshold, holding Peter close to her. The boy was looking at the new house with curiosity. This sweet old woman was clearly not like the wicked Clara. Ethan, explain. Vanessa said confusedly. Who are these guests? This is Molly and her son Peter. Ethan introduced them. Vanessa, the boy is hungry. He needs to be fed. And Molly must be hungry. No, I'm on a diet. The woman shook her head. Ethan only waved his hand, not accepting any excuses. Mom fed them, gently asked. Vanessa was surprised once again. Ethan had been very good to her, but in all the years he had never called her mom anyway. And here suddenly it came out of his mouth. What the hell happened? All right, friends, we'll take these hands to the table, commanded the woman and went to the kitchen. Soon Jack joined them. When he saw Peter, he smiled happily. Hi, you've come to visit us too. Peter only nodded. In response was shy a little. Jack, let's go to the table too, called her grandson Vanessa. The boys ate with appetite, and then ran to the room. There the boys busied themselves with the very huge bear. They taught Laura, they tried to climb it, they laughed at it. They somehow became friends at once. The adults, sitting in the kitchen, listened to the boys fiddling, and each could not dare to be the first to start a conversation. Ethan, I'm listening. Finally, Vanessa said, and I don't know how to say this. Ethan shook his head. Vanessa almost shouted, I don't understand anything. Peter is an exact copy of Jack. Didn't she leave one child at the maternity hospital? No, I can't believe it. It's not like that. Molly decided to answer. I gave birth to the nanny, and so did Peter. They're twins. When Vanessa heard that, she turned pale and clutched at her heart. The news was shocking. So her daughter blamed everyone. Molly talked and talked. Kelly meant well, Molly explained. You see, she wasn't thinking about herself at the birth center. She was scared to imagine how you would react. Vanessa was very worried about Ethan. She couldn't tell you that she'd lost another baby. And here I am. I have healthy twins, and I should be happy, but I can't. There's nowhere to go with the boys. There's nothing to raise them on, and I can't put them in an orphanage. I grew up there myself. I know it's not easy. It was my idea and Kelly's suggestion. And then I talked to the doctor, and God knows. I would never be in your life. It's just the way things are. By some unknown means, I ended up in your village. You're lying, shouted Vanessa. Do you want to take our boy away from us? I won't. You are mistaken. The last thing I want to do is take Jack away from you. I can see now how well he's doing with you. Here's Peter. I can't give him anything. I haven't done much with my life, and it hurts so much. But I can do it. I can do it. I didn't want to tell you anything, but Ethan insisted. Molly was silent for a moment, and then she said pleadingly, You just let me hug Jack, and we'll leave with Peter. Vanessa didn't say anything. She turned away to the window and thought. Ethan was silent as well. Kelly, why didn't you say anything then? You felt sorry for us. Both Ethan and Vanessa had those thoughts. They both didn't know what to do next. And then he listened. The boys are playing in the room, and they're having fun. Can I walk over to them? Quietly, she asked. Ethan nodded in response. But then Vanessa volunteered. No, get out. The woman screamed. I'm not giving you my grandson. No matter what you say now, no matter how sorry I am, you left him. Get out of our house. Molly said nothing, only squared her shoulders more. But it made her look small, like a child. She went to the door. Did you look back? You can call out. Shyly, she asked Ethan. He went into the room, but stopped on the threshold. The boys were standing by the mirror, looking at their image. Peter, you have eyes like mine, Jack said thoughtfully. Yes, agreed Peter. And your hair is the same, only mine is longer. Mania, maybe we're brothers. But the adults were silent. That's why everyone could hear the boys' conversations clearly. No, it doesn't work that way, Jack reasoned. Brothers have the same mom, but we have different moms. Peter, you're lucky, your mom is alive, and mine is in heaven. That's what my grandmother told me. But you have a daddy. What's his house like? Peter sighed. Hey, why don't you come and visit me? We'll play more often. Okay, Peter was happy. Then I remembered. But we're going away. Mom said I don't want to. Molly couldn't listen to it anymore. Peter, come on, we have to go, she shouted from the front door. Peter obediently ran out, dressed Jack, came out to see him off. They even hugged goodbye. But you will definitely come to me again, said Jack. Peter smiled sadly. Everything did not depend on him, and the little boy understood that. Peter was mature beyond his years. Ethan caught up with Molly in the yard. Molly, don't take offense at Olga Vasilievna. Understand, it's very hard for us to understand and accept everything now. And it's doubly hard for her. It turns out she buried her daughter. The name of no one and what? She's confused. I understand, Molly nodded. Excuse me, we'll go. The bus has already left. There will be more tomorrow, don't worry, we will leave. And she, taking her son's hand tightly, walked away from the yard. Molly walked down the street, tears streaming from her eyes. Who was to blame for this? She and only she. The second son was near, and she was not even allowed to touch him. Yeah, it's all my fault. And what are you eating? She whispered to herself. What are you giving him? You're barely pulling one. Peter looked at my mom in surprise and didn't understand why she was crying. She was talking to herself. He only realized that Mommy was very upset, so he took her hand tightly. Mommy whispered the boy, when they were already back in their den at the club. I love you very much, very much. I love you too. Wiping her eyes, Molly said. We're going to be okay. You'll see. The lights were on in Ethan's house for a long time that night. Ethan and Vanessa sat in the kitchen. They had talked about everything 1,000 times. Now they sat there silent, and each of them didn't know what to do next. Kelly had left them to their task. Jack was sniffling in his room in the living room, flashing lights, garlands on the Christmas tree. It would be Christmas in a day, just not joyful at all. Vanessa went to her room and fell into a heavy sleep. Ethan went outside. It was a frosty night. Drops of stars, metals in the dark sky. It was as if they were trying to tell Ethan something. He sighed at the rich, fresh air, but he couldn't breathe it in. Something was pressing in his chest. Resentment, pain, misunderstanding, confusion. How could it be? He's a father, and he's not a father to his Jack. Quite near the same boy, too, as Jack suddenly realized that he was already worried about this second one as a son. How he fell asleep in that clubhouse. I mean, it's cold in there and mice could probably run around. But there's another woman with that other boy, Ethan, a stranger to him. But Jack is his own. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted and a dog barked, and Ethan rubbed his temples and reached for the packet. It was empty. He didn't realize he'd smoked every last one. His head felt heavy and empty. He sighed heavily and went into the house. He couldn't think of anything. How was he supposed to live with that truth? Toward morning, he dreamed of Kelly. She was smiling, stroking his hair gently, and she was silent. Silent. Ethan. He looked at his wife, and it felt like she was alive. "Kelly, how do we go on living?" He asked her. She didn't answer. She smiled again, then suddenly became lighter, brighter, and became transparent, like a haze distant. Just live. Her voice came from far away, and it would be a happy one. Ethan opened his eyes. Jack was asleep next to him. He must have snuck in during the night. Ethan didn't feel it. He covered his son with a blanket and kissed him. Of course, he's Jack's real father. With that thought, he carefully got out of bed and went to the kitchen. Vanessa was baking pancakes. Her eyes were suspiciously red. Crying. Ethan looked at her carefully. She hadn't slept well all night. Thought. Vanessa shrieked. "How are we going to get on with our lives?" "I've been thinking about that too," Ethan admitted. "Ethan, here's what I'm saying. Kelly, don't judge. Don't take offense to her. She meant well, I know that. Well, I've been thinking about something. I mean, sometimes fate gives us a sign, and we don't know what it is we're supposed to do. It could be for a reason, and it just showed up. No, I don't mean she's looking for us. Jack wants to pick us up. I realized that's not true. She's a poor, poor girl who had to make some tough decisions on her own. But it just so happened that she ended up in our village. 2 brothers meeting. So maybe it's a good thing they sought each other when they were little. Now they'll know each other. And I don't understand what you're getting at." Ethan was surprised. That siblings should grow up together. And Ethan froze. What is she saying? What she's saying is that she wants him to give Molly the jar with his own hands. Vanessa realized the look in Ethan's eyes and waved her hands. No, what are you saying? I'm not giving Jack to anyone. But that other boy, Peter, he's exactly like my grandson. I can't sleep at night knowing he's out there wandering around. Vanessa voiced Ethan's thoughts. He just listened and didn't say a word. I think Molly's a nice girl. Ethan, what if you made a deal with her? You sit down. Vanessa, I don't need anyone but Kelly. She's the only one I've ever loved. You can't bring my daughter back. Jack needs a mother. Sighing, Vanessa replied. You think about it. Ethan only shook his head and went out into the yard already with metal. He opened the gate and stepped into the street. People were hurrying past to catch the bus. The stop was about 50 meters away. Ethan saw the figure of a woman with a child at the stop. A large bag next to her. It's Molly and Peter. Ethan picked up his pace. He walked towards Dari without fully realizing. What was he doing? Seeing him, Molly recoiled. A sleepy Peter shrank back to his mother. Ethan approached, saying hello to the people. There were 10 people at the bus stop, and they all looked at the man curiously. He silently took Molly's bag. Let's go to our place, Ethan said quietly. Why? Molly's voice trembled. To live, just to live and raise our sons, Ethan said distinctly. The people at the bus stop froze when they heard it. That's a movie. But further with Ethan was not up to outsiders. They stood and looked at each other in silence. The lights flickered. A bus pulled up. People fussed, and only these two continued to stand. Mom, Peter's voice was heard. We're not going anywhere. And there was so much hope in the child's voice. "Well, you're not going anywhere," Ethan answered for her. He picked up the boy with his free hand, clutched the bag tightly with the other, and walked toward his yard. "Some tomatoes." Molly followed him, and the people from the bus watched them with interest, discussing what was happening and wondering, so whose boys? That Christmas they met with a friendly group. And in November, Molly and Ethan got married. Now they were a real family. A month later, Molly realized she was pregnant. When Ethan found out, he was so upset. "Molly, honey, you can't have this baby," he said bitterly. "Remember what happened with Kelly and me?" But Molly shook her head stubbornly. "As fate wills, so shall it be." She wouldn't be the judge of her unborn child. The pregnancy had been easy, and the closer the birth came, the more worried Ethan. Vanessa, who lived with them and for whom Molly had become like a daughter, was also worried. Would this girl repeat the fate of her daughter? And only Molly was calm. She worked at the club until the last month, worked with her sons, and took care of the house 2 weeks before Ethan gave birth, taking her to the city, to the maternity hospital. The doctors, knowing their difficult situation, insisted that she give birth in the city. Molly called early in the morning. "Our daughter was born," she whispered into the phone. "A daughter." Ethan woke up instantly. "Molly's whispering something. How's our baby sleeping?" "She's fine next to me. She's fine. She's fine." Ethan couldn't believe the miracle. Was that 1% the only one? Then he picked up Molly and her daughter from the hospital. They came home. They were greeted by Vanessa. With the boys, we decided on a name for the baby sister. Jack told him on the doorstep, and Molly smiled. Kelly answered Peter, and everyone nodded in agreement. Of course, Kelly, and may she be the happiest. 2 years passed. Kelly grew up to be a strong, healthy little girl. Molly had already taken your job. They were already in school. One day, a fancy foreign car pulled up outside their house. A young woman got out. Vanessa was just fiddling with her granddaughter in the yard. Seeing the stranger, the older woman walked toward her, taking Kelly in her arms. "Sorry. This is where Molly lives. They told me at the store that a woman pronounced in this house." "Who are you to her?" Vanessa looked at this well-groomed girl in surprise. "And me?" "No one, I guess. But I need to see her." Vanessa wanted to send the girl away, but she didn't have time. Molly came up to the house. "You, Molly?" The girl was happy. "I suppose so. Who are you?" Molly raised her eyebrows. She didn't recognize the girl. "My name is Kathy, and I'm David's daughter. Does that name mean anything to you?" "No." Molly answered sharply and blushed slightly. "Are you mistaken? Go away." "No, of course it's you," Kathy exclaimed. "I've been looking for you for so long. Look, I'm here in good faith." And Kathy, stammering and worried, told me that a year ago her father had been killed in an accident. One day her mother mentioned that her father had once hurt a girl very badly, and then he had taken away her only place to live. The mom said that the girl was pregnant. I could just imagine what it was like for the poor girl, too. I shook my head. "Kathy, with no money and a baby. And I felt so ashamed of my father. How could he? I don't understand. And my mom, she was wrong, too. She forgave my father all his infidelities, and his mistress was willing to live. I understand the others. But this girl was so hurt, so I decided to find her. It's been a lot of work, but I have a good detective, and he found Molly. I know you had a child with my father. You have 2 twin sons, which would make them my brothers. I'd like to help you." Interesting, as Molly finally said. Until then, she had been silent and listened to Kathy. "With money, of course," smiled Kathy. "You tell me where to send it, and I'll do it." "Kathy, I don't want anything from your family." Molly replied firmly. "Go away, please, or I'll call the police." "Molly, you shouldn't do that. We can be good friends. I can take the boys on weekends. We'll have a great time together. I can even take them to the sea." "I mean, that's great. I sincerely think so. Once again, we don't want anything from you. But you shouldn't. But I'll come again." Kathy shrugged her shoulders, got into her beautiful car, and drove off. Molly and Vanessa stood at the gate and looked after the car. "I don't understand why I have to do this," Vanessa asked. "I decided to wash away the sins of my daddy." Molly answered angrily. Then she calmed down a little and smiled. "Let him go to church," Vanessa agreed. A month later, it became known what Kathy had come for. All the TV channels showed that the daughter of a famous banker was detained at the airport with another man's child. It turned out that this Kathy had a sick child and needed an urgent transplant. Kidneys and the donor could only be matched from a close relative of the child, too. So she searched. Her father was quite the ladies' man. So Kathy decided to look among his past mistresses, and she recognized the sale. That's why she came and offered to take the boys to the sea. Her black thoughts were guided by evil motives. When Molly refused, she found another woman who also gave birth to David. And to her, Kathy could find an approach, also offered to take her child to the sea abroad. The woman agreed. Only at the last moment, one of the well-wishers called and told everything. Fortunately, Kathy did not manage to take the child abroad. Now she's under arrest. And her baby was helped, so there was a donor without all this. Molly, when she heard the whole story, she was so scared. "How black people can be. I'm so scared for our boys," she said to Ethan. "What fate awaits them? They have the blood of this David in their veins. God forbid his temper should ever come out." "So what?" Ethan shook his head. "What does it matter what blood? They're our children, my sons. I'm raising them, and they'll look alike. What do I do? So will they. Yeah, you're right. Kids look up to their parents. Are you the best dad to our sons? And for our daughter?" Ethan laughed, and for Kelly too, Molly smiled. They sat in the yard next to their daughter on the grass. Peter and Jack were repairing their bicycle for the first time on their own. Vanessa was in the kitchen baking her signature pancakes. The aroma was divine. Soon Vanessa would call everyone to the table. Everyone was waiting. Clouds were floating in the sky, and someone up there was invisibly close by. He was watching over this family to make sure that everything went well. Because they've been through a lot. Now they just have to be happy.